And welcome back to another edition of the I Prefer the 80s and 90s Sports Podcast or editorial, where I essentially talk about why I, Richard Harris, prefer the sports of the 80s and 90s to today. Today's topic, gimmicks. The NBA, NHL, PGA, LPGA basically have created things within their sports, the WNBA, to try, in their view, to get more people to watch their sport. For some reason, what was happening in the 80s and the 90s was a bad thing. For some reason, the athletes of the 80s and the 90s was bad for today, in my view. Because back in the 80s, 70s, 90s, the athletes cared every time they put their shoes on, shorts on, dress on, uniform on to get on a court or field, and it mattered. Everything mattered. And the players, the owners, the leagues just got out of the way and let them play. Golf has the FedEx Championship because they want to determine a champion at the end of the year. Who's the best? But it doesn't determine who's the best, because golf is a sport about who's playing the best that weekend, that Sunday, to win. And so putting X amount of events together and doing it on a point system and eliminating players, everyone in this country apparently is addicted to the NCAA basketball tournament because they think the NCAA basketball tournament's excitement can be replicated in pro sports and various sports, and it can't. And the reason why it can't is what makes the NCAA basketball tournament special is that some university from East Bump, California, could beat Duke, could beat Kentucky. You don't get that in professional sports. You don't get an 0-16 team to beat the Kansas City Chiefs in Game 17 when Kansas City Chiefs has all their players playing. You don't get a 9-72 team in the NBA to beat the Denver Nuggets in a game, in the last game of the season, if the Denver Nuggets has all its players playing. You don't get that. And yes, in professional sports and in particular leagues, yes, you have games during an 82-game season where a bad team beats a good team because a good team wasn't focused that night, tired from the night before, whatever the reason. It happens. There's 82 games. In baseball, it happens all the time. A bad team goes in to play a good team, and they beat them. They may even sweep them. They may take 2 out of 3. But you don't need gimmicks to bump a season, especially the NBA. The NBA just implemented a new rule that says that if you play more than 65% of the games in the season, you are eligible for awards at the end. which totally goes against everything that they've been about for the last decade or more, which is this new thing called load management, where teams first, then the players decide not to play in games because they need to be ready for the playoffs. They need to be ready for a rough stretch coming up, which is nuts. You know why it's nuts? It's nuts because people today think that they just are smarter and know more than what we knew in the 80s and 90s. The human body, apparently, that didn't break down so much in the 80s and 90s, today they break down. They have more arm injuries. You know why they have more arm injuries? Because the 80s and 90s, they produced a new pitch in baseball that people still are struggling to throw today. And that pitch is called the split finger fastball. The split finger fastball, you put the baseball in between your first finger and your middle finger and you throw it home. And it messes up your elbows. Or pitchers today try to throw different types of fastballs that requires them to put more strain on their elbows, thus creating the injuries. And the funny thing is, when I was a kid, they used to say you couldn't throw curveballs. You had to learn how to throw a curveball correctly, and they would monitor how many curveballs you could throw. And so some leagues didn't even allow you to throw curveballs. Today, there leagues exist where kids can't throw curveballs. That's why injuries happening so much in baseball arms. For some reason, leg injuries are on a rise because my generation stupidly thought that playing football on carpet was smart. And sometimes sneakers and cleats grab the carpet, tear your knees up. I saw the most disgusting injury ever. Not the Joe Theismann injury, because that was on grass, but it was Philadelphia was playing somebody, and I want to say it was Fred Barnett, but it could have been Mike Quick. Their careers came to an end because they blew out both knees on that surface. So the surfaces hurt football players. And of course, head injuries, you hit somebody with your head, it's going to hurt, especially going 20 miles an hour each time. Of course it's going to hurt. But you don't need gimmicks. The NBA's gimmick is foolish because if teams are going to rest players, load manage players, well, why would they play in the tournament? Does the winning team get money? The WNBA just had one recently. And the Liberty played the Aces. And the Liberty beat the brakes off the Aces. What did they get? They got a trophy. Maybe they got a little cash. I don't know what the other prize was, but they got a trophy. But all the statistics, all of the other information that should be important, not important. Didn't improve the standings. And therefore, last night when the Liberty played the Aces again, and the Aces won, that counted. So is the NBA playoff games or play-in or tournament games going to count? Are teams going to be mandatory to make sure their players play? And you say, well, they're just trying to get people to watch the games. Guess what era I grew up in? I grew up in an era where the NBA tagline was NBA action is fantastic. And they would show all these famous people, Diane Cannon, Jerry Seinfeld, Eddie Murphy, Chevy Chase, all saying NBA action is fantastic. In fact, Chevy Chase is so memorable because he would say, NBA action, it's good. That was hilarious. I think her name was Diane Cannon, not Diane Carroll. But the action spoke for itself. And the NBA wasn't on TV until the 80s. Unless it was on tape delay. And so The game was the sell. The players was the ticket. Today, you go to a basketball game, you have no clue who's going to be at the game playing. And do you really think that these teams are going to say, now granted they're doing a tournament early in the year so that everybody's going to play because there's no reason for load management, but you really think that teams are going to care about playing in a tournament? And is the tournament game going to count towards your schedule? Like the WNBA, where it doesn't count? They can't fix the All-Star game in football because common sense has said players get hurt playing in the Pro Bowl. Because in football, you got to get hurt to play the games. I mean, you can't play soft. You can't play at half speed. You have to go all out, or you could get seriously hurt. So they can't fix the Pro Bowl in football, so they got to make gimmicky things to make people want to watch. That I get. Hockey, they don't go all out in the hockey games because in a real hockey game, it used to be more violent. Well, they've taken the violence almost completely out of hockey. And so having what they're doing on their weekend makes sense. 3-on-3 game makes sense. And of course, they were obviously worried about goalie safety because in years past, the goalie would be basically a target because no one was playing defense. And therefore, goalies were getting tons of pucks fired at them. That was dangerous. Golf didn't really need a FedEx Cup in the 80s and 90s because in most seasons, it was pretty clear who was the golfer of the year. But even this doesn't prove who's the golfer of the year because those awards are decided beforehand. Excuse me, I'm choking. The Major League Baseball All-Star Game. They said, let's put a gimmick in where the league that wins the All-Star Game gets home field advantage in the World Series. Teams didn't like it, but they did it, and now they've gotten rid of it. Because now it's going to be based on the best record. And now that everybody's playing against each other, if you have the same record, then they'll do it based on head-to-head because you're playing 3 games. Clearly, this is an important blog because my voice is being taken from me, so I can't complete it. LOL. The All-Star Game in baseball was serious back in the day. American League guys didn't like National League guys. Pete Rose damn near killed Fosse in the 70s trying to score a game-winning run. It's not even an issue of not liking them. It's just a question of they wanted to prove that they were far superior. Today, everybody's buddies because there are so many things going on off season, during season with baseball that players, they play from each other's countries. They're just all very close. In interleague play, they get to play against each other all season long. So there is no rivalry or animus because it doesn't need to be. You play because you want to play. Excuse me. My simple point is We didn't need the gimmicks in the 80s and the 90s. Sports today are so bad that they need the gimmicks in all the sports to try to bring people to watch them. Fans of the 80s and 90s, we like the sports. We grew up liking sports because our fathers or our mothers or our big brothers or our big sisters was in our ear about it. We played it with our friends. We argued with our friends about who's better. All these things that they still do today. Fantasy sports. All these things that are done today to sort of keep that water cooler mentality year round. And still, the leagues today feel the need to do gimmicks. For people to criticize the All-Star game, the dunk contests, and basketball, who cares if it's boring? We just want to see the best dunkers dunk, but they don't dunk anymore because they don't want to get hurt or because they've gotten hurt and it's changed the way they play the game. In the 80s, Michael and Dominique did the dunk contest. It was their thing. They took pride in it. Vince Carter did the dunk contest. Kobe did the dunk contest. LeBron never done the dunk contest. He's supposed to be the face of the league. He's supposed to be the flag bearer. Well, he's not anymore. He's like 65 years old, but he still is. And the bottom line is, he won't do it. Can't do it now. He's 39 years old. But the point is, the players at the highest peak of the league, the people that people want to see, do them. We want to see John Morant in the dunk contest. But he can't keep his guns hidden. We want to see Ken Griffey Jr. go up against Mark McGwire, Barry Bonds in the home run derby, Juan Gonzalez, and we got to see it. But baseball got taught a lesson in that, yes, they wanted to do it, and they did the home run derby. And then some players were like, well, it kind of affects my swing too much. Maybe I shouldn't do it. Well, Pete Alonso loves to do it. And they've capitalized on him today doing it. But he don't win all the time. The point is, yes, media needs to stop complaining about the sports. So do the fans, and so do the players. And no, it's not a slave owner mentality either. It's a league mentality because you're doing it for the bigger picture. You're making $40 million a year based on the fact that me and 100 other million people in this country buy tickets to see you. So your league should not have to have gimmicks to make you want to play. Should not have to create things in order to make your sport viewable, pleasurable, and most importantly, likable. That's it.